Hello, we are sewing our scrunchie today. So in our kit we have safety pin, piece of elastic. This is on the outside, this is a little test piece of fabric. We have our bow and we have our big scrunchie piece here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to test on my little swatch here. I like to have about a 2.5 SB. It could be a little bit bigger if you want. It could be a little smaller. I would recommend 2.5, maybe bigger, not smaller. Everything looks good. You want to see your stitches looking nice up and down. Nothing loopy, nothing bumpy on either side. So with starting, we are going to take our long rectangular piece. We're going to sew along the long edge. We have a notch here to start at the end. There's a notch on the other side as well. Okay. We're going to sew 3/8 away from the edge. For me, that is the distance of my foot here, and that's very convenient. I'm going to do a little back stitch, and then we're going to sew straight. I don't use pins when I sew typically, so you'll see my hands here. I'm holding it in place, and then I pull behind just a little, very gently as I go. If your seam allowance is not totally perfect, if it's not exactly 3/8, it's going to be just fine on this scrunchie. Don't worry about it too much. And same thing, if your notches don't line up 100%, remember these are all cut by hand. Everything in the sewing industry is done by hand, so we all have little human errors sometimes. If something is 1/16 of an inch off, 1/8 of an inch off, it's going to be okay. So now we have our long tube. We're going to turn it inside, or right side out, I should say. Push it in there. I like to give it a good shake. Okay, here we go. We have our beautiful satin finish on the outside. We're going to now, we should have taken our stickers off before we turned it there. Take your sticker off. If you leave your sticker in there, it will be fine. Okay, fold it in half, and then we get this W shape on the end here. So this part's a little tricky. We're going to sew around this circle. I'm going to start in the middle. Start in the middle. Oops. This part's tricky because as you're sewing around a circle, there are always those other sides that want to get in the way, and if you sew over them, you're going to have a little problem. So you just have to keep them out of your way with your fingers. Okay. Back stitch. Push those corners out of the way. Beat it around here. This part especially, if you don't line up your edges perfectly, it will be fine. You probably won't even notice on your finished product. I know it's fun to be a perfectionist, but sometimes there are areas where you don't need to be. And when you know those areas, it makes such a difference. Okay, so we got around our funny W shape there, and now we have a tube with this seam allowance open at the top. So now we're going to take our elastic and our safety pin. We're going to go right through. I like to hold the tail of my elastic in my pinky finger here so that I don't lose it in the tube, because if you just let it go, you're going to just be going in a circle forever. Here we go. Still got my elastic in my pinky finger. If you have another pin and you're worried about it, you could always pin it to the one side of the scrunchie, but I think you'll be fine with just using your hands like that. Okay. Now we are through. Close that. We're going to do our best to make sure our elastic is not twisted, so we're going to stretch it out like that. It looks nice and straight. And we're going to sew it flat like this so that we don't have any bunches. If you find that it's really difficult to get this piece of elastic in your machine and sew it flat, you can sew it where you pinch it together. It's easier, just not quite as nice. We're going to do a back stitch on here. It can be sloppy, it can be vertical, it can be horizontal, however your machine gets in there. You just need to make sure it's really secure. Do a nice zigzag with your machine. That is good and secure. Looks a little bit ugly, but that's okay because it's going to go inside like that. Okay, now this is the last step for our scrunchie. We have this seam allowance here. We're gonna fold it in. I got my fingers at the edge of that opening. I'm gonna line up that center seam there, pinch it. I'm gonna start about 3/8 or maybe 1 pinky width away from that opening. I'm going to edge stitch. So instead of our 3/8 seam allowance, I'm gonna stitch along the edge as nicely as I can. If you're not super close, it's okay. About 1/8 will do. If you can get a 1/16, that's gonna look really nice as well. Go, and I'm gonna stitch again about 3/8 past the opening. That is typically about the width of one of your pinky fingers. Okay, we have our finished scrunchie. Way to go. Now we're gonna work on our bow. So we have our bow here, sticker on the wrong side. Where's my sticker? There it is. Okay, we are going to sew from the notch the notches up here. We're gonna sew all the way to the corner there. This side, we're gonna do a little back stitch. Go around here. Now if your machine kind of struggles to do a back stitch, you have another option here when you're sewing off a curve. You can really do this when you sew off anything instead of a back stitch, is you just keep sewing. Keep sewing for a little bit. It's gonna make this rope. You trim it maybe 1 inch away. That rope is gonna tangle on its own naturally, and it is going to be very similar to a back stitch. And now because this is a point that we wanna turn out, we're going to clip it inside of our stitch line, and that's gonna make us have a nicer point at the end. Okay, and we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So we line up our notches. Start at the notch. We're gonna come unthreaded here. Okay. We're gonna fold along the curve. Pull your edges up as best we can. On this one, I'm just gonna come off it again. There we go. If you want a back stitch, that is great. I'm just showing you another option here. Trim that corner. Okay. I'll remember to take the sticker off this time. We're going to turn this right side out. Now, to get these corners of our bow pointed out nicely, I guess it's a tie, not a bow, I'm going to use my closed safety pin. I'm just going to poke it in there. It's going to get me a nicer point. You can use your finger. Sometimes at home I've used a pen lid. Careful not to use the actual pen, because then you'll get ink on your piece. But I think this safety pin tip, sorry you can't see me there, safety pin tip is going to work great. Okay, there we got one. Got my pin out. Now on this side, maybe I'll put my finger in first, see if I can get it. Now we'll do that last little poke with our safety pin. It just looks so nice when you have your corners pointed out, especially after we iron this. Okay, there we go. Now again, we have this little opening here. We're gonna tuck that seam allowance in. My edges are about here. I'm gonna start roughly 3/8 back so that I make sure to secure all of it, and I'm going to do that edge stitch again. bow is done. Now I don't recommend pressing this scrunchie because it's so nice and fluffy looking, but if you want to press your bow, absolutely give it a press. On low heat if you have this satin, you can use medium heat if you have one of the cotton ones. And then to finish it off on your scrunchie, I go to the seam area because that's what we're going to cover with our bow. Tie it in a regular knot. If you want to experiment with different kinds of knots, you totally can. I found just a regular knot typically looks really nice and it's easy to do. Okay. Thread here. Make sure to trim all your threads. And we did it. We have this beautiful scrunchie here. If you want, you can tack with thread, tack your bow in place here. I don't like to do that because I like my bow to be removable. That way I can wear it with the bow and without.